CEO stunned. When Janitor speaks 9 languages, what follows will break your heart. It was just past 11:30 at night when Naomi, dressed in her usual gray janitor uniform, quietly pushed her cleaning cart through the grand marble lobby of the Langston Hotel. The place looked like something out of a movie: tall golden pillars, polished floors, and the soft glow of chandeliers hanging above. Naomi walked calmly, her eyes steady, her steps practiced. This was her routine. Clean. Stay quiet. Don't get noticed. But then something unusual happened. Near the family lounge, a young girl sat alone on a couch, tears rolling down her cheeks. Her parents were nowhere in sight. Naomi stepped closer and knelt beside her, speaking in soft, perfect Dutch. "It's okay, sweetheart. We'll find your parents," she said gently. The little girl sniffled, then asked with wide eyes, "You speak Dutch?" "I speak 9 languages," Naomi replied with a warm smile. Before the girl could respond, 2 tourists nearby asked her a question in German. Naomi answered fluently without missing a beat. Just as she stood up to leave, 2 Japanese guests struggled to explain their dinner request to room service. Naomi casually stepped in, spoke to them in Japanese, and fixed everything in under a minute. All this happened in less than 10 minutes. What Naomi didn't realize was that the CEO of the hotel, Mr. Langston, had been walking down the hallway just then. He stopped mid-step and stared from a distance, eyebrows raised. This quiet janitor. She wasn't what she seemed. Mr. Langston didn't say a word that night, but Naomi noticed the look. People rarely looked at her twice. That was her plan, to stay invisible. She had done it for 5 years now, but tonight she'd been seen, truly seen, and that changed everything. After the child was reunited with her parents, Naomi quickly returned to her work. She avoided eye contact, wiped down the check-in counters, straightened brochures, and pretended nothing happened. But inside, she felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Why had she let herself speak so freely? Why didn't she just stay quiet like always? She moved to the 15th floor and continued her rounds. Doors closed around her, voices murmured behind them in different languages. Some tourists laughed, others argued. Naomi could understand most of it. Language had always been her gift, a gift she once used in classrooms, not hotel hallways. Evening. "Miss Languages," Jorge, the young bellboy, said playfully from the elevator. Naomi smiled, trying to appear relaxed. "Evening, Jorge. How's your English practice going?" "Better every day," he replied, grinning. "Maybe someday I'll sound like you?" "You already sound smart," she said softly. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." But her smile faded once she turned away. Being noticed was dangerous. She couldn't afford it. Not now. Not after everything. Downstairs, Mr. Langston stood at the edge of the lobby, deep in thought. He watched the child hugging her parents, watched Naomi vanish behind the service door, and then pulled out his phone. He didn't call anyone. He just stared at Naomi's name on the staff directory. Naomi Brooks, night custodian. Started 5 years ago. Background: limited info. Something didn't add up. A janitor fluent in 9 languages? Who could calm guests like a trained diplomat? And yet, she cleaned floors. He wasn't sure what the truth was, but he wanted to find out. Naomi, meanwhile, stood alone in the break room. The buzz of vending machines and the low hum of pipes filled the silence. She opened her locker and pulled out a small notebook from behind a worn jacket. Inside were phrases written in Arabic, French, Russian. She flipped past the pages until she reached a photo, one that showed a woman who looked just like her. Same eyes, same quiet expression. It was her sister. Naomi traced her finger over the image and whispered, "I'm still looking for you." She tucked the notebook away, locked the door, and returned to work. but tonight felt different, like something had shifted. Like the invisible wall she'd carefully built around her was starting to crack, and she knew deep down that someone had finally seen through it. Naomi didn't sleep much after that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she replayed the moment the CEO stared at her. It wasn't rude, it wasn't suspicious either. It was curious, like he'd seen something he couldn't explain and wanted to understand more. That was the problem. Curiosity always led to questions, and questions could destroy everything. The next evening, Naomi arrived at the hotel like always, 15 minutes early, coffee in hand, hair tied neatly back. She clocked in and gave a quiet nod to the security guard, who barely looked up from his screen. That was how she liked it. Invisible. Just part of the background. But when she stepped into the lobby, Jorge was already waiting near the elevators, holding a clipboard and wearing a grin that meant trouble. "You've got a fan," he whispered, nudging his chin toward the hallway. Naomi followed his gaze and saw Mr. Langston, this time not just passing by. He was standing there, arms crossed, eyes fixed on her, waiting. "Just be careful," Jorge added, lowering his voice. "Bosses don't usually care what night staff are up to, unless they're planning something." Naomi gave a faint smile and pushed her cart forward. She was hoping to slip past, but Mr. Langston stepped forward. "Ms. Brooks," he said politely. She stopped. "Yes, sir?" "I wanted to thank you for helping that little girl last night." "That was impressive," Naomi nodded. "I just did what anyone would do." "I don't think so," he replied. "Most people wouldn't know how to comfort a crying child in Dutch, then turn around and guide Japanese tourists in their native language, especially not while mopping floors." Naomi gave a small shrug. "Languages have always come easy to me." "I can tell," he said. "How many do you speak, if you don't mind me asking?" Naomi hesitated. 9. His eyebrows lifted. 9? She nodded again, trying not to show anything. "It's just a hobby." "Hobby," he repeated, almost amused. "You don't see many janitors with that kind of hobby." Naomi felt the tension rise in her chest. "I should get back to my rounds." "Of course," he said, stepping aside. But he didn't move far. He stood there for a moment longer, watching her disappear into the elevator. That night, Naomi took the long route around the hotel. Every hallway, every corner. She moved a little more carefully. The building felt different now. Not threatening, just aware. Like eyes were on her that hadn't been there before. On the 42nd floor, she stopped to clean the windows overlooking the city skyline. The lights outside twinkled like stars. She liked this view. It reminded her of all the places she once worked. Places that spoke different languages, wore different clothes, but felt strangely the same. As she cleaned, she thought about how she got here, about the woman she used to be, about the sister she'd lost. She remembered the day she walked into the Langston Grand Hotel for the first time. She used a fake name, no resume. Just said she was looking for a night shift cleaning job. They were short-staffed and didn't ask many questions. She got hired that same day. That was 5 years ago. She had no idea then how long she'd stay. But hiding has a strange way of becoming habit. It feels like safety, even when it's just a cage you've built for yourself. Later that shift, she passed by Jorge at the concierge desk again. He was practicing English with a pocket dictionary, mumbling words under his breath. Naomi paused. "Try this," she said gently, and showed him a memory trick she'd once taught to diplomats. His eyes lit up. "How do you know all this?" he asked, genuinely curious. "You teach better than my professors." Naomi smiled faintly. "I used to teach," she said before catching herself. "A long time ago." He looked like he wanted to ask more, but respected the wall she quietly kept around herself. Meanwhile, Downstairs in his office, Mr. Langston sat behind his desk, flipping through employee files. Naomi Brooks, age 34, hired in 2020. No previous employment history listed, no emergency contact. Nothing. It didn't sit right with him, not in a bad way, but in a mystery way. He'd met hundreds of employees over the years. People who exaggerated, fumbled interviews, begged for promotions. Naomi didn't ask for anything. She cleaned floors like she was solving a puzzle, spoke to guests like she'd trained for it, and vanished the moment her shift ended. Who was she? Back. In the break room, Naomi opened her locker and pulled out a small, worn box hidden behind her spare shoes. Inside was a collection of items that didn't belong in this life: a university ID badge, international conference name tags, and a photo of her sister. She touched the edges of the photo with her fingertips. Her sister was still missing. And Naomi knew that staying invisible was her only way to keep searching without being found herself. But now, someone was noticing her. And once someone sees you, hiding becomes a lot harder. Her phone buzzed. No name, no number, just a message. You. Broke silence. Are you still looking? Naomi's heart skipped. It had been 3 years since she heard from anyone connected to her past. She stared at the screen, frozen, her reflection looking back at her in the black phone glass. And just like that, the past was reaching for her again. Naomi sat motionless in the break room, staring at her phone screen. The message glowed faintly. You broke silence. Are you still looking? No sender, no timestamp. Just those words. Her hands trembled slightly. She locked the phone, then unlocked it again, hoping it was a mistake. But the message was still there. No reply option. Whoever sent it knew how to stay hidden. She tucked the phone into her pocket and tried to breathe. For 3 years, she'd avoided being noticed. No online searches from work devices, no contact with old colleagues, no paper trails, just long nights, short conversations, and cleaning supplies. But someone had found her, and they wanted her to know it. Later that night, Naomi was vacuuming the hallway near the executive conference rooms when Mr. Langston walked past. He was talking on the phone, speaking in tight, business-like sentences. No, the translator didn't show. Whole deal fell apart. We lost the Swiss account. He paused when he saw Naomi. Their eyes met briefly. He gave a nod and lowered the phone. Good evening, Ms. Brooks. Evening, sir, Naomi replied politely. He hesitated, then said, Could I ask you something? Naomi paused the vacuum cleaner. Of course. Earlier tonight, I overheard you helping guests in 3 different languages. I'm curious, how did you learn them? Naomi smiled softly, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. From life, she said. Travel, books, work. Langston studied her. Have you ever considered working in guest services or as a translator? She shook her head. I prefer the quiet. You're clearly overqualified for what you do. Naomi turned the vacuum back on. Maybe I like clean floors. That would have ended the conversation, but he lingered a second longer. I don't think you're running from work, he said. I think you're hiding from something. She didn't respond, and that silence said everything. After her shift, Naomi didn't go straight home like usual. Instead, she walked a few blocks past the hotel, through empty city streets, until she reached a tiny all-night diner with flickering signs. She ordered tea and sat in the back corner. From her bag, she pulled out a folded piece of paper, a photocopy of an old newspaper clipping. Linguist disappears during UN assignment. Sister demands answers. Below the headline was a picture of 2 women side by side, Naomi and her younger sister. The last time they'd been seen together? Publicly. Naomi had spoken out when Lena went missing, filed reports, called officials. But the more noise she made, the more her own life became complicated. She was warned to stop. One message even arrived in her mailbox with no return address. "Next time it's you." She disappeared not long after that. New name, new city, new job. And now, years later, the silence she'd carefully built was starting to crack. The next day, Naomi found a small envelope taped inside her locker. No one had seen who put it there. Inside was a postcard. A photo of Bangkok's skyline at night. On the back, in handwritten Cyrillic script, were the words, "Onai Shujava, Bangkok." Naomi didn't need to translate it. She is still alive. Bangkok. Her throat tightened. She gripped the postcard so hard her knuckles turned white. No signature. No way to know if it was real or just bait. But deep inside, she felt it. Her sister wasn't gone. She was out there, and someone wanted Naomi to find her or walk into a trap. Back at the hotel, things were shifting. Naomi could feel it in the air. Mr. Langston had started showing up during night shifts more often, pretending to check reports, but clearly watching her. Not in a creepy way, more like someone trying to solve a puzzle without all the pieces, and Jorge had noticed too. "Is it just me?" he whispered one night. "Or is the CEO suddenly way too interested in the janitor?" Naomi forced a laugh. "He probably likes the way I mop." Jorge grinned. "Well, if mopping in Mandarin is the new trend, you're ahead of the game." Naomi chuckled. It was the first real laugh she'd had in weeks, but the smile faded quickly when she checked her phone later. Another message had appeared. Unit. A47. Riverside storage. Key under sink. Use it soon. She stared at the screen, heart pounding. Whoever was behind this. They weren't going away. They were leading her somewhere. That night, after the hotel emptied out and her shift ended, Naomi didn't go home. She took a taxi to Riverside Storage, a quiet, run-down facility by the water. She found the unit. 247, just like the message said. She unlocked it using a spare key she found taped exactly where the message said it would be, under the sink in the staff break room, where no one ever looked. Inside the unit, she found a small metal box. Documents. Photos. Maps. One picture stopped her cold. It was a surveillance image of a woman who looked almost exactly like her, but it wasn't her. It was Lena, wearing different clothes. Different hairstyle, standing outside what looked like a medical facility in Bangkok, alive. Naomi's breath caught. She had no idea who sent her the message, but she knew now. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Naomi didn't sleep after. Finding the storage unit, she sat on the edge of her bed, the metal box open beside her. Files were scattered around her. Old photos, stamped documents, maps with locations marked in red ink, all pointing to one city, Bangkok. She held the picture of her sister. Lena's face looked thinner, her eyes dull, like someone who'd been worn down. But she was alive. Naomi whispered the words out loud, as if hearing them would make it real. She's alive. For 3 years, she'd been chasing empty trails, looking for signs, praying, grieving in silence. And now, just like that, someone had placed the truth in her hands. But why now? And who? The next day, Naomi arrived at work like usual. Same uniform, same quiet steps. But inside, everything felt different. She felt watched. Not by the hotel cameras, not by guests, by fate, by the past. Mr. Langston was in the lobby when she arrived. He looked tired, suit jacket slung over one shoulder, as if he hadn't been home. He gave her a brief nod as she passed. He didn't stop her, but she knew the questions were coming. And they did, sooner than she hoped. Later that evening, as Naomi was dusting the tall glass windows outside the ballroom, he approached her again. This time, without pretense. "Ms. Brooks," he said softly. "Can we talk?" She paused, wiped her hands on her apron. "If it's about last night—" "It's not," he interrupted. "It's about you." Naomi's stomach turned. "Sir?" He gestured toward the conference room. "Just 5 minutes." Something in his voice felt sincere. Not like a boss. More like a man trying to understand something he couldn't ignore. She nodded. Inside the conference room, he didn't sit at the table. He stood by the window, watching the city lights below. "I know something's not right," he said quietly. "You're brilliant, Ms. Brooks. I've seen how you handle guests, how people talk about you, the way you speak to strangers like you've studied them your whole life." Naomi didn't respond. Her fingers stayed laced together in her lap. "I checked your file," he continued. "There's nothing there. No history, no school records, not even a reference. And yet here you are, cleaning rooms and correcting people's grammar in 4 languages." Naomi looked down. He turned to her. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" The question hung in the air, not accusing, just concerned. Naomi took a breath. "It's safer if I don't explain." Langston looked confused. "Safer for who?" She hesitated. Then, "For everyone." She stood to leave, but he gently blocked the door. "Just tell me one thing," he said. "Are you running from something? Or toward someone?" Naomi met his eyes. "I'm trying to find my sister." And with that, she left. Back in the staff locker room, Naomi sat for a long time staring at her open locker. The box was still hidden under her spare clothes. The Bangkok photo burned a hole in her thoughts. She pulled out the postcard again. The message on the back repeated in her mind like a whisper. She is still alive. Bangkok. She didn't know who to trust. She didn't know if the storage unit was a trap. But she did know one thing. If her sister was out there, she had to try. And maybe, just maybe, she needed help. Later that night, she found Jorge in the lobby restocking pamphlets. He looked up and smiled like always, but Naomi's face was serious. "I need a favor," she said quietly. His smile faded. "Anything." She handed him a slip of paper. "If anything ever happens to me, call this number." Jorge stared at it. "What is this?" "A backup plan," she said, "and a warning." He looked shaken but nodded. "Are you in danger?" "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I think I'm about to find out." The next day, Naomi was called into the CEO's office. She expected questions, maybe even suspicion. But instead, Langston offered her something unexpected. A temporary position, one night only, as a translator for a private international gala the hotel was hosting. He said the event was short on qualified interpreters, and after seeing her talents, he thought she could help. The offer surprised her. She almost said no. But something made her stop. Maybe this was a chance, not just to earn trust or money, but to listen, watch, gather information. Someone at this event might know something about Lena, she agreed. "I'll do it," she said quietly. Langston nodded, though he seemed surprised. "You'll need to be ready by tomorrow night." Naomi left his office and headed for the break room. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and resolve. She pulled out the blue dress she had kept hidden in her locker for emergencies. She hadn't worn it in years. It didn't match her janitor life. But maybe it belonged to who she was before. That night. She stood in front of the mirror in the staff restroom, adjusting the dress. She hardly recognized herself, but maybe it was time to stop hiding. If Lena was alive, Naomi had to find her, even if it meant stepping right into the light she'd avoided for so long. The ballroom looked like something from another world. Golden chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks. Waiters in crisp uniforms. moved quietly through a sea of crystal glasses and perfectly folded napkins. Flags from over 20 countries lined the walls, and each table bore small name cards written in multiple languages. Naomi stepped into the room through the staff entrance, her dark blue dress brushing the floor. Her hair was tied back in a neat knot, and a small hotel pin shimmered quietly on her lapel. She felt out of place, not because of the dress, but because for the first time in 5 years, she wasn't invisible. As she stepped further into the room, someone handed her an earpiece and a tablet. "You'll be covering floor interpretation," the coordinator whispered. "Move between tables if needed. Stay alert." Naomi nodded. She had done this kind of work before, long ago. Back, when she still used her real name, the guests arrived in waves. Investors, diplomats, foreign press. They spoke in Portuguese, Russian, German, Mandarin, and Naomi listened carefully, her brain tuning into each shift like an old radio clicking into the right frequency. At one table, she explained contract, terms between 2 European delegates. At another, she helped a South Korean guest understand the event schedule. She didn't draw attention, just moved quietly, efficiently. But her presence didn't go unnoticed. Mr. Langston stood by the bar, dressed in a black tuxedo, watching her with something between awe and curiosity. It was one thing to hear about someone's gift. It was another to watch it in action. Naomi wasn't just interpreting, she was bridging gaps, calming tensions, smoothing cultural misunderstandings before they became problems. She was solving problems without raising her voice. And then, everything shifted. Near the back of the room, a man stood with a glass of red wine in his hand, watching Naomi. He was tall, sharply dressed, with silver hair and the kind of stillness that drew attention without asking for it. His name tag read, T. Aoki, International Consultant. When Naomi passed nearby, he spoke softly, in perfect Japanese. "I've seen you before," he said, eyes narrowing. Naomi replied smoothly in Japanese. "I don't believe we've met, sir." "Not under this name," he said. She paused, only for a second. But it was enough. "I once worked with a linguist," he continued. "A brilliant woman. She disappeared after a certain project went sideways. But she had a sister who looked quite a bit like you." Naomi kept her face calm. "There are many faces in this world." "Yes," he said, switching effortlessly to French, "but not many who speak like you do." She replied in French, too. "Is there something you need help with tonight?" He smiled faintly. "Perhaps later." And just like that, he walked. Away. Naomi's heart pounded. He had seen through her. Or at least, seen enough. She found a quiet moment to slip away into the hallway. Her hands shook as she gripped the edge of the sink in the nearest restroom. Her reflection looked steady. Her body did not. That man knew something. Maybe he had worked with Lena. Maybe he worked with the people who took her. Maybe he was one of them. Naomi dried her hands, smoothed her dress, and returned to the ballroom. She didn't have the luxury of falling apart. As the night continued, Naomi helped resolve a tense negotiation between 2 investors miscommunicating over a translation error. She directed a lost journalist to the correct press area and translated a speech from a Brazilian executive so well that the room fell into stunned silence. Her mind was spinning, but her training kept her steady. Across the room, Langston watched it all unfold, not with suspicion now, but with admiration and a quiet sense of confusion. This wasn't just a janitor with a secret. This was a woman carrying something far bigger than anyone knew. He approached her gently during a break. "You're extraordinary," he said simply. Naomi shook her head. "I'm trying to help." "You're doing more than helping. You're holding this event together." She looked at him for a long moment, then said, "You once asked me if I was running away. I wasn't." Langston nodded. You're running toward something. Naomi gave the smallest smile. Or someone. He didn't ask more. He just said, "If you ever decide to stop running alone, let me know." As the evening ended, Naomi collected her things and stepped outside into the cool night air. The city lights blurred as she blinked back tears. She should have felt relief. Instead, all she felt was the tightening of a knot in her chest. Because as much as she wanted to stay quiet, blend in, disappear, something had been set in motion. That man from the gala? He was connected to Lena's past. And now he had seen her. She walked slowly down the sidewalk, past the side of the hotel where the deliveries came in. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Another message. This one had no text, just a photo of Lena. But this time it wasn't a surveillance still. It was recent. She was in a lab coat standing in front of a glass wall, looking tired, faded, but alive. The photo had a note scribbled along the bottom. She's still working, but not by choice. Naomi leaned against the wall, gripping her phone like it was the only thing keeping her from falling. It was real. She wasn't crazy. Lena was alive, and she was being held. Somewhere far away. Somewhere Naomi would have to go. And this time, there would be no hiding. Naomi didn't tell anyone she was leaving. Not Jorge, not Mr. Langston, not even the hotel's front desk, where she quietly handed in her badge after 5 years of silent service. She packed one small backpack, left, most of her life behind, and boarded a flight using a temporary travel document arranged under her alternate identity. She didn't even take her phone. Only the photo of her sister and the note that had come with it. She's still working, but not by choice. The plane lifted off the runway and climbed into the dark sky, but Naomi couldn't sleep. Her thoughts were heavy. It had been years since she'd been this close to the truth, and it terrified her. By the time she landed in Bangkok, the heat wrapped around her like a warning. She didn't head to the tourist spots or hotels. Instead, she followed. The instructions sent in a final message before she left. A set of coordinates and a name scratched into the edge of the note, Knock. Knock turned out to be a woman in her 50s who ran a shipping business out of a tiny office near the river. The place smelled like motor oil and old fish, and half the walls were covered in shipping permits and worn maps. "You Naomi?" she asked, not looking up from her desk. Naomi nodded. "You look tired," Knock said, finally glancing up. "That's good. Tired people don't make stupid decisions." Naomi gave a faint smile. Knock reached under her desk and handed her a sealed envelope. "Your sister was working for a facility out on the water. Private research. Offshore. Officially, it doesn't exist." Naomi opened the envelope slowly. Inside were photos, maps, a hand-drawn layout of what looked like a compound on a small island. "This place," Knock continued, "they take people with rare talents, linguists, coders, analysts. They use them, control them. You don't leave unless someone comes for you." Naomi's voice barely came out. "She's still there?" Knock nodded. "Yes, but I don't know how long they'll keep her." Naomi's stomach turned. "How do I get in?" "You don't?" Knock said flatly. "But I know someone who can get you close. From there, you're on your own." That night, Naomi sat alone in a borrowed room above a fish shop, staring at the map. Her sister was less than 100 miles away, yet unreachable. She tried to remember the last time she'd spoken to Lena. Really spoken, without fear, without silence between them. They'd grown up speaking in code, mixing languages to talk in public without anyone understanding. It was their secret world. And now, Naomi realized, it might be the key to reaching her. She took out an old notebook and began writing. Building. A phrase only Lena would recognize in the mixed language they'd made up as kids. She would find her. She would speak to her. and Lena would know she wasn't alone. 2 nights later, Naomi stood on the deck of a small, battered fishing boat. The captain was a man with kind eyes and barely any English. He didn't ask questions, just handed her a life vest and pointed toward the horizon. "There," he said. "Island." The compound came into view just before sunrise. It didn't look like a prison, more like a sleek, quiet research facility with tall glass windows and modern architecture. But Naomi knew better. Places like this weren't built for public eyes. They were made to vanish. The boat didn't go all the way to shore. Naomi slipped quietly into the water, gear sealed in a plastic pack strapped to her back. The ocean was warm, but every stroke felt like a mile. She reached the rocks behind the compound and climbed up slowly, breathing hard, her body shaking with cold and fear. There was no going back now. She found the service tunnel exactly where the map said it would be, half covered in seaweed and trash. Crawling inside, Naomi felt like she was sinking into another world. Damp concrete, old piping, echoes. Inside the compound, she moved carefully, her steps silent. Her body remembered things her mind had long tried to forget. How to read a hallway, how to check corners, how to listen not just for footsteps, but for changes in the air. She reached a central hallway with glass walls, just like the photo, and then, through one of those walls, she saw her. Lena. Her sister was seated at a table, headphones on, staring into a screen, recording something. Her movements were too perfect, too still, controlled. Naomi's heart ached. She opened her notebook and wrote the phrase she'd prepared in their childhood code. Then, carefully, she held it up to the glass. Lena's eyes moved slowly to the window and stopped. She stared at the message, then at Naomi, and for a moment, nothing. Then her lips moved. One word. "Naomi?" Naomi nodded, tears burning her eyes. But before they could do anything, the hallway lights flickered. Then a voice echoed through the facility. "Unauthorized breach detected. All personnel secure your stations." Naomi grabbed her sister's hand. "We're going home," she whispered, and the alarm began to sound. The alarm echoed through the cold corridors like a warning bell from the past Naomi had tried to bury. Red lights pulsed along the ceiling. Somewhere above, metal doors slammed shut, ceiling exits. Naomi didn't flinch. She looked at her sister. Really looked. Lena's face was pale, her eyes wide and confused. Her voice barely broke into sound. How are you here?" "I followed the signs," Naomi whispered, pulling her gently toward the door. "I never stopped." Lena stumbled, dizzy. Naomi noticed a faint injection mark near her neck. They'd been keeping her under something. Medication, sedation. She was alert, but not steady. Naomi took her full weight onto her shoulder. They had maybe minutes before security found them. "This way," she said, pulling her down the hallway. She didn't need a map anymore. She knew how to get out. What mattered now was making it without being seen. They moved through the service tunnels, past echoing chambers and silent labs. At every door, Naomi paused, listened, then moved quickly when it was clear. Her mind raced, not just about escape, but about what came next. If Lena was here, others might be too. People like her, people with knowledge, people being used. And Naomi had the proof, still sealed in the waterproof pack strapped to her back. Documents, hard drives, a full copy of the facility's database. She had it all. They turned the final corner when Lena collapsed suddenly. Her legs gave out under her, her breathing shallow. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I'm slowing you down." Naomi dropped to her knees beside her. "No, you're the only reason I'm here." "I tried to stop them," Lena whispered. "I kept hoping you'd forget me." Naomi shook her head, eyes burning. I could never. She pulled Lena back up. Together, they pushed through the last stretch of tunnel and out into the night air. The boat was still there, just off the shore, bobbing in the low tide. The captain had waited, despite the risks. Naomi helped her sister into the shallow surf, waist-deep in water now. She waved her arm. The captain saw them. He brought the boat closer. They climbed aboard, collapsing onto the wooden planks, breathless, soaked, and trembling. Naomi looked back at the island. The compound stood still and shining in the moonlight. So quiet, so clinical, so full of horrors no one would believe unless she told them. And she would. Back in Bangkok, they didn't go to the embassy or a hospital. Naomi knew better. There were too many people watching, too many hands tied to the wrong pockets. Instead, they went to a safe house provided by Nok, the woman from the docks. Inside, Lena slept for 2 days straight. Naomi didn't rest. She uploaded files, sent encrypted copies to the press, to human rights groups, to people she once worked with before disappearing. She didn't use her real name. She didn't need to. The truth spoke louder than a name ever could. 3 weeks later, news headlines began to roll in. Whistleblower reveals secret facility targeting linguistic experts. Underground program using language to control thought. Private research group under global investigation. The world was finally listening. At the Langston Grand Hotel, Jorge sat at the concierge desk scrolling through articles, heart racing. He hadn't heard from Naomi since she disappeared, but now, she was everywhere. Or rather, her actions were. He read every word, eyes wide. When Mr. Langston came through the lobby, Jorge waved him over. "Sir, I think you should see this." The CEO leaned down, eyes scanning the screen, and then he paused. There, in the background of a news photo, was a blurry image of 2 women walking down a pier, arm in arm. One of them was Naomi. Langston stared for a long time. Then he smiled softly, more to himself than anyone else. "She did it," he said quietly. "She really did it." A few months later, in a small town far from Bangkok, Naomi and Lena sat on a quiet balcony overlooking the sea. Lena was thinner, still healing, but her eyes were clearer now. She had started reading again, writing small journal entries. Naomi was building something new. Not a job, not a new name, a platform. She had begun working with independent researchers around the world to create safe networks for whistleblowers and survivors of secret programs like the one that had stolen years from their lives. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't running. She was creating. Lena placed a gentle hand on her sister's. "You saved me," she said. Naomi shook her head. "You held on long enough for me to find you." They sat in silence for a while. Then Naomi asked, "Do you remember the language we made up when we were kids?" Lena smiled. "I still think in it sometimes." Naomi laughed. "Me too." And then she said something in that private code. Just 5 words. Words that meant, "We made it back home." And now, to the viewer, what would you sacrifice to protect someone you love? Your comfort? Your safety? Your name? Naomi gave everything. Not because she was brave, but because she couldn't live with the silence anymore. And sometimes, that's where real courage begins. If Naomi's story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder. You are stronger than you think.